The moving truck was already halfway up my driveway when I realized my son had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I stood there on the porch of the Haven, the house I'd built with my own 2 hands over 5 years, watching strangers unload furniture that didn't belong to them. My son Marcus stepped out first, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Behind him came Kendra, his wife, barking orders at the movers like she owned the place. Then her mother, her sister, her cousin. A whole parade of people I didn't invite, didn't want, and sure as hell didn't build this house for. "Morning, Dad," Marcus called out, waving like this was normal. Like showing up unannounced with a moving truck to take over a man's home was just another Sunday visit. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Kendra strutted up the steps in her high heels, sunglasses pushed up on her head, and that fake smile plastered across her face. "We thought we'd surprise you. You said you'd think about it, so we figured why wait, right? You have so much space here, and we didn't want you getting lonely." Lonely. That word sat in my mouth like dirt. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. See, 3 years ago, I lost my wife Elena. Cancer took her slow, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but memories and the dream we'd built together. This house, the Haven, was supposed to be our retirement. Our peace. 10 acres of pine trees, a creek that sang in the mornings, and a kitchen big enough for her to bake bread and hum gospel songs while I worked in the garden. But she never got to see it finished. So I finished it alone. Every board, every window, every nail driven with hands that shook because I was building for a ghost. And now these people, my own son and his calculating wife, thought they could just walk in and claim it. I should have said something right then. Should have told them to turn that truck around and get off my property. But I didn't. Because anger makes noise, and I've learned that silence is sharper. Silence makes people nervous. Makes them wonder. Makes them show their true colors. So I just smiled. A small, quiet smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Well," I said, my voice calm as Sunday morning, "isn't this a surprise?" Kendra clapped her hands together like a child. "I knew you'd be happy. We're going to take such good care of you, Dad. You won't have to lift a finger." Marcus slung his arm around my shoulder. "It'll be like old times, right? Family, all together." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second, I saw the boy I used to know. The one who'd help me fix fences and carry lumber without complaining. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man I barely recognized, one who'd learned that charm could get you things you didn't earn. I patted his hand. "Like old times," I repeated. They took that as permission. The movers started hauling boxes inside, and Kendra's mother was already rearranging my dining room chairs, talking about freshening the place up. My grandkids ran through the hallway, their laughter echoing off walls that used to hold only silence and memory. And me. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching my piece get dismantled piece by piece. But here's what they didn't know. What none of them could have guessed. I wasn't standing there helpless. I was standing there planning. Because you don't survive 71 years on this earth without learning a thing or two about people. About greed. About the difference between family and blood. And sometimes, the quietest man in the room is the most dangerous. I didn't know then that this visit would change everything I'd built, not just the house, but my faith in family. Would you ever let family move into your peace? Comment below what you'd do if you were Harold. The first time I should have seen it coming was 6 months earlier, right after I told Marcus I'd finished building the Haven. He and Kendra showed up that weekend with a store-bought pie and big smiles. We sat on the porch and I walked them through the property, showed them the garden beds I'd prepared for vegetables, the workshop where I kept my tools, the master bedroom with windows facing east so Elena could have watched the sunrise. "Wow," Kendra said, running her hand along the porch railing. "This is really something, Dad. You did all this yourself." I nodded. "Took me 5 years, but yeah, built it from the ground up." She exchanged a look with Marcus. Quick. Almost too quick to catch. But I caught it. "Must have cost a fortune," Marcus said, trying to sound casual. "Cost what it cost," I replied. "Paid for it with the money from selling the old house in town. Elena and I saved for years." Kendra leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "So it's completely paid off? No mortgage or anything?" There it was. The first crack in the mask. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes weren't admiring the craftsmanship or the view. They were calculating. Adding up. Measuring value. "That's right," I said. "All mine." Marcus cleared his throat. "That's smart, Dad. Real smart. You know, Kendra and I were just talking about how you should probably think about estate planning. You know, to protect everything you've built. Make sure it stays in the family." "Estate planning," I repeated. "I'm 71, son. Not dead." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Of course not. We just mean, you know, for the future. You worked hard for this. We want to make sure nobody takes advantage of you." I almost laughed. Takes advantage. Like I was some senile old fool who couldn't see a con when it was sitting on my porch eating my pie. But I didn't say that. I just nodded and changed the subject to the grandkids' school. Let them think I was too old to notice. Too tired to care. That's when I started keeping a journal. Nothing fancy. Just a little notebook where I wrote down dates, conversations, things that felt off. Elena used to tell me I was too trusting, that I saw the good in people even when it wasn't there. Maybe she was right. But I wasn't blind. The visits started coming more often after that. Every other weekend. Then every weekend. Always with some excuse. Just checking in. "Wanted to see how you're doing. Thought you might need help with yard work." But they never came to help. They came to look. To comment. To plant seeds. Kendra would walk through the house like she was shopping for curtains. "This place could really use a woman's touch, don't you think? It's so masculine." Her mother came once and wrinkled her nose at my furniture. "Oh, Harold, this stuff is so outdated. When you're ready, I know a great interior designer." Marcus started asking about my bills. My insurance. My bank accounts. Always framed as concern. "Dad, are you managing okay out here? Do you need help with anything financial?" I'd smile and tell him I was fine. And I was. More than fine. I had my military pension, my savings, and enough sense to know when I was being circled by vultures. Elena's voice would whisper in my head during those visits. She used to say, "Harold, some people don't want to earn things. They want to inherit them. And they'll smile at you while they wait for you to die." I used to think she was being harsh. Now I knew she was being honest. One night, after they'd left, I sat in my workshop with a cup of coffee and my journal. I wrote down everything. Every comment. Every look. Every question that felt more like reconnaissance than concern. And then I wrote something else. A plan. Not detailed yet. Just the beginning of an idea that would grow into something they'd never see coming. Because if there's one thing I learned from building houses, it's this. You have to lay a good foundation before you build anything that lasts. And revenge, real, quiet, permanent revenge, needs the strongest foundation of all. I thought they were visiting out of love. Turns out, they were scouting for conquest. If someone said this to you, would it sound like concern or calculation? Let me know in the comments. The weekend visits turned into something worse, expectations. By month 3, Kendra stopped asking if she could rearrange things. She just did it. I'd come back from the workshop to find my living room furniture moved, my kitchen cabinets reorganized, my personal photos taken down and replaced with generic artwork she'd brought from home. "Much better," she'd say, hands on her hips, admiring her work like she'd just renovated the Sistine Chapel. "Don't you think it flows better now, Dad?" I'd nod. Say nothing. Let her have her little victories while I planned the war. Marcus got bolder too. Started talking about our future here, like it was already decided. One Saturday afternoon, he walked the property line with me, pointing at the woods. "You know, Dad, this back section would be perfect for a second house. Maybe a little guest house for when Kendra's family visits. We could split the cost, and—" "No," I said. He blinked. "What?" I said no. "This land stays as it is." His jaw tightened, but he recovered quick. That salesman smile slid back into place. Right. Of course. Just thinking out loud. But I saw it. That flash of anger. That momentary slip where the mask fell and I saw what was really underneath. Entitlement. The belief that what was mine was already his, just waiting for me to die or get out of the way. That night, I sat down with my lawyer. Frank Morrison had been practicing law in our town for 40 years. We'd gone to high school together, back when dinosaurs roamed and gas cost 30 cents a gallon. "Frank," I said, sliding into the booth at the diner where we'd agreed to meet. "I need your help with something." He looked up from his coffee, reading glasses perched on his nose. "This about that house of yours? How'd you know?" "Harold, I've been hearing things. Small town, remember? People talk. Your daughter-in-law's been telling folks at the salon that she's moving into the family estate." He said it with air quotes and a raised eyebrow. My chest went tight. "She said that. Word for word. Linda at the salon called me last week, asked if I'd drawn up papers for you. I told her I don't discuss client business, but—" He leaned forward. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The visits. The questions. The way Kendra looked at my house like it was already hers. The way Marcus kept pushing about estate planning and trusts and making sure family was taken care of. Frank listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" he asked. "Depends. What do you think I'm thinking?" He smiled. "That you want to pull the rug out from under them in a way they'll never forget." I smiled back. "Tell me what I can do, Frank." "Legally." We talked for 2 hours. He explained trusts, foundations, charitable donations, irrevocable transfers. My head spun with legal jargon, but the core message was clear. If I acted fast and did it right, I could make sure the haven went exactly where I wanted it to go. And it wouldn't be to Marcus and Kendra. The next morning, I started making calls. The county clerk's office. The state non-profit registration board. An old friend who ran a women's shelter 2 towns over. By the end of the week, I had a plan. Not just a plan. A blueprint. And like every good blueprint, it was detailed, precise, and built to last. I named it after Elena. The Elena Whitner Foundation for Single Mothers and Widows. The mission would be simple. Provide safe, comfortable housing for women who had nowhere else to go. Women who'd been abandoned, abused, widowed, or just plain forgotten by a world that didn't care. The haven would become exactly what Elena always wanted it to be. A place of peace for people who needed it most. Not for people who wanted to take it. I kept working on the paperwork in secret, tucked away in my workshop where nobody bothered to look. Marcus and Kendra kept visiting, kept making their little comments, kept rearranging my life like I was a piece of furniture they could shove into a corner. But every time they smiled at me, I smiled back. Because I knew something they didn't. Their time was running out. I thought they were family. Turns out, they were just tenants who hadn't paid rent. Would you stay silent like Harold, or confront them head-on? Drop your thoughts below. The announcement came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from the tomato beds, when I heard tires on the gravel driveway. I looked up and saw Marcus's truck, freshly washed and shining in the sunlight. He stepped out wearing khakis and a button-up shirt like he was heading to a job interview. Kendra followed in a bright yellow dress, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing that smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. Surprise visit. I called out, wiping dirt from my hands. Not a surprise, Dad, Marcus said. We texted you. I didn't check my phone much. Didn't see the point. If something was important, people could drive over and tell me in person. But I didn't say that. I just nodded and led them inside. We sat in the living room, the one Kendra had already redecorated twice without asking. She poured 3 glasses of wine, even though I told her I didn't drink anymore. Doctor's orders after the blood pressure scare last year. So, Marcus said, setting his glass down with a clink. We have some news. I waited. Kendra clasped her hands together, practically vibrating with excitement. We're moving. Oh. I kept my voice neutral. Where to? She laughed. Bright and loud and completely fake. Well, we've been talking about the future. About family. About how the kids are getting older and need more space. And with your health. My health. I raised an eyebrow. She backtracked fast. I just mean, you're getting older, Dad. You shouldn't be out here all alone. What if something happens? What if you fall, or have an emergency? Marcus jumped in. We've been thinking about this for a while, and it just makes sense. You built this place for family, right? So why not actually have family here? I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just a deep, bone-tired sadness that my own son had become this. A man who'd dress up greed in the costume of concern and expect me to applaud. You want to move in here, I said. Not a question. A statement. Exactly. Kendra beamed. It's perfect, don't you see? You get company, we get space. The kids get to grow up in this beautiful place their grandfather built. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. Except the man who built it. I looked at Marcus. And you think this is a good idea? Dad, it's a great idea. You're sitting on 10 acres of prime property, a 4-bedroom house, and you're here all by yourself. Meanwhile, we're crammed into that rental in town, paying $1,500 a month for half the space. It just makes sense. There it was. The truth underneath the pretty words. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their rent. Elena's voice whispered in my head, "Don't let peace be stolen by polite thieves." I set my untouched wine glass on the table. Let me think about it. Kendra's smile faltered. Think about it. That's what I said. This is a big decision. I need time. Marcus leaned forward. Dad, what's there to think about? We're family. This house is big enough for all of us. You said yourself that you built it for family. I built it for my wife, I said quietly. I built it for Elena. And she's gone. The room went silent. Kendra looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his shoes. But we're still here, he said finally. And we want to be here for you. I stood up. My knees ached, and my back reminded me that 71 wasn't the same as 41, but I stood tall. I said I'll think about it. That's all I'm willing to say right now. They left 20 minutes later, disappointed but not defeated. I watched their truck disappear down the driveway, and then I walked straight to my workshop. I pulled out my journal, flipped to the page where I'd been keeping track of everything, added today's date and a simple note. They asked. I said I'd think about it. Time to act. That night, I called Frank. It's time, I told him. Start the paperwork. I want everything transferred by the end of the month. You sure about this, Harold? I looked out the window at the haven, bathed in moonlight. Elena had loved how the moon lit up the pines. She'd stand on the porch with her coffee every night, just watching. I'm sure, I said. More sure than I've been about anything since she died. They took my silence as surrender. They had no idea it was strategy. What would you do if your child's spouse wanted to take over your home? Share your thoughts below. The moving truck showed up exactly 1 week later. No warning. No call. Just the sound of diesel engines and hydraulic lifts at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. I was making coffee when I heard it. The rumble echoed through the woods, getting louder as it climbed the long driveway. I walked to the window and watched the truck crest the hill, followed by Marcus's vehicle, Kendra's SUV, and 2 other cars I didn't recognize. My coffee went cold in my hand. They came prepared. 2 professional movers started unloading boxes while Marcus directed traffic like a foreman. Kendra emerged from her SUV in workout clothes, ponytail bouncing, already on her phone. Behind them came her mother, Gloria, a woman who'd never liked me and never bothered to hide it. Then her sister Tracy, and some cousin whose name I'd never bothered to learn. My grandkids, Lily and Jacob, ran straight for the creek, shouting and laughing, oblivious to the fact that their parents had just staged a hostile takeover. I walked out onto the porch, hands in my pockets, and just watched. Marcus saw me and waved. Morning, Dad. Hope you don't mind, we figured we'd get a jump on things. You said you'd think about it, and Kendra thought it'd be easier if we just helped you decide. Helped me decide. Like I was a child who couldn't make up his own mind. Kendra bounded up the steps, energy radiating off her like heat off asphalt. We're going to make this place feel like home, Dad. You'll see. It's going to be amazing. Gloria was already inside, criticizing my furniture before she'd even set her purse down. Oh, Harold, this couch is from the 90s. We need to get you something modern. Something that doesn't smell like mothballs. Tracy wandered through the kitchen, opening cabinets. Where do you keep the good dishes? We'll need those for Sunday dinners. The cousin, I think his name was Derek, was eyeing my workshop. Is that building over there heated? I could use it for my woodworking business. My workshop. The place where I'd built this entire house. Where I'd cried when Elena died. Where I'd planned my revenge against the very people now trying to claim it. I stood there, silent, watching my sanctuary get dismantled piece by piece. Watching strangers, because that's what they'd become, invade the space Elena and I had dreamed about for decades. But I didn't stop them. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't throw them out. Because the paperwork was already filed. The foundation was already registered. The deed transfer was scheduled for Monday morning. I had 3 days. 3 days to let them unpack, settle in, start imagining their future in my house. 3 days to let them believe they'd won. Marcus found me in the garden an hour later. Dad, I know this is sudden, but trust me. This is going to be good for everyone. You need family around. You need people who care. I looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was graying at the temples now. He had lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He looked tired. Older. More like me than I cared to admit. And for just a second, I felt sorry for him. Sorry that he'd married someone who'd turned him into this. Sorry that he'd forgotten the lessons I taught him about earning what you have, respecting what others built, treating people with dignity. But pity doesn't undo betrayal. Marcus, I said quietly, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were young? About taking things that aren't yours. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, there's a difference between being given something and taking it. You used to know that difference. He opened his mouth to respond, but Kendra's voice cut through the air. Marcus, come help with the beds. Your father's mattresses are ancient. He glanced back at her, then at me. We can talk later, Dad. I should go help. I watched him walk away, and I felt something inside me close. Like a door locking. Final. Irreversible. That night, after they'd all settled into their claimed bedrooms, Kendra in the master bedroom that Elena had picked out, Gloria in the guest room I'd built for visiting friends, Tracy and Derek spreading out in the spare rooms like occupying forces, I went to my workshop. I sat at my workbench, surrounded by tools I'd used to build dreams, and I pulled out my journal one last time. I wrote, they thought they were moving into a house. They didn't know they were stepping into a lesson. Then I closed the journal and locked it in my toolbox. Monday was coming. And with it, the reckoning they'd never see coming. They thought they were moving into a house. They didn't know they were stepping into a lesson. Would you have stopped them at the door, or let them dig their own grave like Harold did? Comment below. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the small bedroom I'd retreated to, the one at the back of the house near the workshop, listening to sounds that didn't belong. Kendra's mother snoring through the wall. Marcus's heavy footsteps in the hallway. The creak of floorboards in the master bedroom where strangers now slept in the space I'd built for Elena. At 2 in the morning, I gave up. Put on my jacket and walked out to the workshop, the only place that still felt like mine. The moon was full, casting silver light through the pine trees. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of sawdust and motor oil. This was my church. My sanctuary. The place where I'd built everything that mattered. I sat at my workbench and pulled out the folder Frank had given me 3 days ago. Inside were documents with official stamps, legal language I barely understood, and one simple truth. By 9 o'clock Monday morning, the haven would no longer be mine. But it wouldn't be theirs either. I spread the papers across the bench. The deed transfer. The foundation charter. The mission statement I'd written myself in plain language because lawyers always complicated things. To provide safe, dignified housing for single mothers and widows who have nowhere else to turn. To honor the memory of Elena Whitner, who believed every person deserves a place to call home. My hands shook as I read it. Not from fear. From something else. Relief, maybe. Or the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd built something that would outlast the greed trying to destroy it. I thought about Elena. How she used to sit with me in this workshop, handing me tools, asking questions about measurements and angles. She never cared about the technical stuff. She just wanted to be near me. Wanted to be part of what I was building. You're always fixing something, she'd say, smiling. A fence, a chair, or someone's heart. But some hearts can't be fixed. Some people choose greed over gratitude, and no amount of love or teaching can change that. I tried with Marcus. Spent years showing him how to work with his hands, how to earn respect, how to treat people fairly. But somewhere along the way, he'd learned different lessons. From Kendra, maybe. Or from a world that rewarded taking over giving. Either way, he'd made his choice. And now, I was making mine. I pulled out a pen and signed the final document, the one that made the transfer irrevocable. My signature looked shaky in the dim light, but it was legal. Binding. Permanent. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the ceiling beams I'd installed 15 years ago. Strong. Solid. Built to last. Just like the lesson I was about to teach. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I woke at dawn, made coffee in a kitchen that now smelled like Kendra's perfume instead of Elena's bread. Gloria was already awake, complaining about the water pressure. Tracy was on her phone, scrolling through furniture websites. Marcus came downstairs in pajama pants, yawning. "Morning, Dad. Sleep okay?" "Fine," I lied. Kendra appeared in yoga pants and a tank top, stretching dramatically. "I think we should paint the living room. Something brighter. More modern. What do you think, Dad?" I sipped my coffee. "I think you should all meet me in the living room at 9 o'clock. I have something to tell you." Her smile faltered. "Tell us what?" "You'll find out at 9. The next 2 hours crawled by. I sat on the porch, watching the sun rise over the trees, thinking about all the mornings Elena and I had planned to spend here together. All the mornings she'd been robbed of by cancer. At 8:45, Frank's truck pulled up. He stepped out carrying a briefcase, his expression serious. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. "Been ready," I said. We walked inside together. The family was gathered in the living room, Marcus on the couch, Kendra perched on the armrest, Gloria and Tracy in the chairs they'd claimed, Derek standing by the window. The grandkids were outside, thank God. They didn't need to see this. I stood in the center of the room. Frank stood beside me, briefcase in hand. "Thank you all for coming," I started. Kendra laughed nervously. "Dad, we live here now. Where else would we be?" I ignored that. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week. About family. About what I built here. About what Elena would have wanted." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Okay. And I've realized something important. This house, the Haven, was never meant to be a place where people take what they didn't earn. It was meant to be a place of peace. Of purpose." Gloria frowned. "What are you talking about, Harold?" I looked at Frank. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the documents. "What I'm saying is this. I've sold the property." The room exploded. "What?" Kendra shot to her feet. Marcus's face went white. "You what?" "I sold it. The papers were filed this morning. The new owners take possession at noon today. If they wanted to make the Haven theirs, I'd let them, but on my terms. Do you think Harold went too far, or was this justice? Drop your answer in the comments." Kendra's scream could have shattered glass. "You can't do that. You can't just sell a house out from under your own family." "Actually," Frank said calmly, opening a folder, "he can. The property was in his name solely. No co-signers, no liens, no legal claims from any family members. It was his to sell." Marcus stood up, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something close to panic. "Dad, this is insane. We just moved in. We gave up our rental. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," I said. The words came out colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Gloria pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're a selfish old man. Your own son, and you're throwing him out on the street." "Nobody's throwing anyone anywhere," I replied. "You put yourselves here without permission. Now you'll have to leave. The new owners want you out by Friday." Tracy's voice was shrill. "Who did you sell it to? Who would buy a house with people already living in it?" I looked at each of them. Marcus, who'd forgotten every value I'd taught him. Kendra, who'd seen my home as nothing more than a prize to claim. Gloria and Tracy and Derek, who'd treated my space like a free hotel. "The Elena Whitner Foundation for Single Mothers and Widows," I said. The room went silent. Even Kendra stopped pacing. "What?" Marcus whispered. "It's a charitable foundation I established in your mother's name. This property will now serve as housing for women who have nowhere else to go. Women who've been abandoned, abused, or widowed. Women who actually need help, not people who just want something for nothing. Kendra's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You gave our house to charity? It was never your house, I said quietly. It was mine. And now it belongs to people who'll appreciate it. Marcus sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Dad, he said, his voice cracking. Why? Why would you do this? Because you forgot something important, son. You forgot that love isn't about what you can take from someone. It's about what you give. And all you wanted to take was this house, my peace, and my dignity. Frank cleared his throat. Mr. Whitner has also arranged temporary housing assistance for you through the county. You'll have resources to help you relocate. But you need to be out of this residence by 5 p.m. Friday. Kendra turned on me, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You let us move in knowing you were going to kick us out. What kind of monster does that? The kind who wanted to see if you'd prove me wrong, I said. I kept hoping you'd show me some respect, some gratitude, some sign that you understood this wasn't yours to take. But you didn't. You just kept acting like you owned it. Because you're our family. Marcus shouted. Family shares. Family respects boundaries, I shot back. Family asks before taking. Family doesn't show up with a moving truck and act like they own someone else's dreams. The argument went on for another 20 minutes. Threats of lawyers. Accusations of senility. Kendra crying about betrayal. Gloria calling me names I hadn't heard since the Navy. But none of it mattered. The papers were signed. The foundation was registered. The deed was transferred. By the time they finally ran out of steam, it was almost noon. Frank packed up his briefcase and headed for the door. You have until Friday, he said. After that, you'll be trespassing. They left in a fury of slammed doors and squealing tires. Marcus didn't even look at me as he loaded the kids into his truck. And suddenly, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet I'd been missing for weeks. I walked through each room, looking at the boxes they'd brought, the furniture they'd arranged, the lives they'd tried to transplant into my space. By Friday, it would all be gone. And in its place would come people who actually needed what I'd built. I thought about Elena. About how she'd always said the measure of a person wasn't what they owned, but what they gave away. She'd be proud of this. I knew she would. By the time they raised their glasses to toast, they were already toasting their own eviction. Would you have warned them, or let them find out the hard way like Harold did? Tell us below. Friday came faster than they expected and slower than I wanted. I spent the week mostly in my workshop, staying out of the way while Marcus and Kendra scrambled to pack up their lives. The arguing never stopped. Through the walls, I could hear Kendra screaming on the phone about lawyers, about rights, about that vindictive old bastard. Marcus tried talking to me once. Thursday evening, he knocked on the workshop door. Dad, can we talk? I didn't answer right away. Just kept sanding the chair leg I'd been working on. Finally, I said, Doors open. He came in, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I'd seen him in years. Not like the confident salesman who'd shown up with a moving truck. More like the boy who used to help me build fences and ask questions about wood grain. I just want to understand, he said. Why you did this. Why you couldn't just talk to us. I set down the sandpaper. I did talk to you, Marcus. I said I needed to think about it. You heard, yes, because that's what you wanted to hear. But to sell the house? To a charity? Dad, this was supposed to be our inheritance. There it was. The word that had been lurking under every conversation. Inheritance. Son, you can't inherit something while I'm still alive. And even if you could, you can't inherit what you don't respect. He looked at the floor. I respect you. No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have shown up with a moving truck. You wouldn't have let Kendra rearrange Elena's house like it was a furniture store. You wouldn't have treated my space like it was already yours. Kendra just wanted to help. Kendra wanted to own, I interrupted. There's a difference. And you let her. Worse than that, you helped her. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, I could hear Kendra yelling at the movers again, something about being careful with her dishes. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally. I didn't see it that way. I thought we were being practical. Practical, I repeated. That's a nice word for greedy. He flinched like I'd hit him. Maybe I had. Sometimes the truth lands harder than fists. Are you going to forgive me? He asked. I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in his shoulders. I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. You need to learn this lesson, Marcus. You need to understand that people aren't resources to be managed. They're people to be respected. He nodded slowly, then turned and left without another word. Friday at 4 p.m., the last truck pulled away. Kendra didn't say goodbye. Neither did Gloria or Tracy or Derek. They just loaded up and left, trailing dust and resentment. Marcus was the last to go. He stood by his truck, keys in hand, looking back at the house one more time. I was on the porch, coffee in hand, watching. You really going through with this? He called out. Already done, I said. He nodded, got in his truck, drove away. And just like that, the haven was mine again. For one more hour. At 5 p.m., Frank pulled up with 3 other cars behind him. The first car held Sarah Chen, the director of the women's shelter I'd partnered with. The second held Maria Rodriguez and her 2 daughters, the first family who'd be moving in. The third held 2 volunteers who'd help with the transition. I met them on the porch, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled for real. Welcome to the haven, I said. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the house. This is really for us. It's really for you, I said. For as long as you need it. Her daughters ran toward the creek, laughing, free in a way I recognized. The way children should always be. Sarah shook my hand. Mr. Whitner, what you've done here is extraordinary. This foundation is going to change lives. That's the idea, I said. Elena always wanted this place to mean something. Now it will. We spent the next hour walking through the house. I showed them the kitchen, the bedrooms, the garden beds that would need tending. Maria touched everything with reverence, like she couldn't believe it was real. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded and showed her where I kept the tools in case anything broke. By sunset, they were settled. I could hear laughter coming from the kitchen, the kind of genuine joy that had been missing from this place for too long. I packed my own bags, not much, just clothes and tools and the journal I'd been keeping. Frank had helped me secure a small cabin about 2 miles away, deep in the woods. 1 room, 1 bathroom, a wood stove, and a porch overlooking the creek. It was perfect. More than perfect. It was mine. As I loaded my truck, Sarah came out to see me off. Where will you go? She asked. Not far, I said. Just far enough. She smiled. You're a good man, Mr. Whitner. Your wife would be proud. I hoped so. God, I hoped so. When I told them who the real new owner was, silence finally filled the room, the kind of silence that only truth can bring. Did Harold do the right thing, or should he have given his family another chance? Share your answer in the comments. The cabin became my real haven. It was nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a roof that didn't leak, and a porch where I could watch the sun come up over the creek. I built a small vegetable garden out back and set up my workshop in a shed that came with the property. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like someone was watching, waiting, calculating what they could take from me next. I'd drive past the haven sometimes, just to check on it. Not because I missed it, I didn't, not really. But because I wanted to see if the foundation was keeping its promise. And it was. Better than I'd hoped. Maria and her daughters thrived there. She got a job at the local grocery store and saved enough to start looking at her own place. The foundation helped her with a down payment when she was ready to move on. Her daughters planted flowers in the garden I'd built for Elena, and somehow, that felt right. After Maria, there was Jennifer, a widow whose husband had died in a construction accident, leaving her with 3 kids and no insurance. Then came Rose, who'd escaped an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back. Then Angela. Then Christine. Then others whose names I learned and stories I heard. Each one stayed as long as they needed. Each one left stronger than when they'd arrived. Each one proved that the haven had become exactly what Elena had dreamed it could be, a place of healing, not of greed. Sarah called me every few months with updates. "You should come to the open house," she'd say. "The residents want to meet you." But I always declined. This wasn't about me getting credit. It was about them getting peace. Marcus tried to contact me a few times. Letters at first, which I read but didn't answer. Then phone calls, which I let go to voicemail. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger takes too much energy when you're 71, but I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine either. About 6 months after they'd moved out, I got a letter that was different from the others. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written in a hurry or with a lot of emotion. I opened it on my porch one evening, coffee cooling in my cup. "Dad," it started. "I know I don't deserve a response, but I need to write this anyway. You were right. About everything. Kendra and I are separated. She wanted to sue you for the house, and I realized I couldn't stand by someone who'd do that to my own father. I know that doesn't fix what I did, and I know words are cheap. But I'm sorry. Really sorry. I'm trying to teach my kids the lessons you tried to teach me. About earning things, about respecting people, about being grateful instead of greedy. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to show me. I love you, Dad. Marcus." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe someday. But reading those words was enough for now. Enough to know that the lesson had landed, even if it took losing everything for him to learn it. 1 year after the foundation opened, Sarah invited me to an anniversary celebration. "Please come," she said. "Just for an hour. The families want to thank you." I almost said no. But something in her voice, maybe it was the way Elena used to ask me to come to church even when I didn't want to, made me agree. The haven looked different when I pulled up. The garden was bursting with vegetables and flowers. The porch had been painted. Children's toys were scattered across the lawn. It looked lived in, loved. Inside, about 20 people had gathered. Current residents, former residents, volunteers, and Sarah's staff. They'd hung a banner that read, "1 year of hope. Thank you, Harold." I felt my throat tighten. Maria saw me first and rushed over with her daughters. "Mr. Whitner. Girls, this is the man I told you about." The youngest daughter, maybe 7 years old, handed me a drawing. It was a house with a garden and stick figures holding hands. At the top, in wobbly letters, it said, "Thank you for our home." I had to look away before anyone saw the tears. They'd prepared food, potluck style, everyone bringing what they could. We ate together at the long table I'd built years ago, and I listened to their stories. Stories of survival, of hope, of second chances. Rose, the woman who'd escaped abuse, stood up and spoke. Before I came here, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never be safe again. But Mr. Whitner gave me a place where I could heal, where my kids could feel safe. He gave us our lives back. Everyone clapped. I didn't know where to look. Sarah stood up next. This foundation has served 12 families in its first year. 12 families who now have stable housing, job opportunities, and hope for the future. And it's all because one man decided that his legacy was more important than his comfort. More applause. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable with the attention. But then I looked around the room, at the faces of people who'd been given a chance, who'd been shown that someone cared, and I understood why Elena had always pushed me to think bigger than myself. This was what she'd wanted. Not a house in the woods where we'd grow old together, but something that would outlast us both. Something that would prove that one person's choice to give could ripple out farther than greed ever could. As I watched new families move in, I realized the haven was never truly mine to keep. It was meant to heal others. Would you rather have a big house all to yourself, or give it away to help others? Let us know what you'd choose. 2 years after I sold the haven, I sat on my cabin porch watching the sun sink behind the pines. The creek babbled its constant song. Birds called to each other as they settled in for the night. The air smelled like pine needles and earth, the way fall always smells in the woods. I had my coffee, decaf now, doctor's orders, and my journal. The same one I'd used to document Marcus and Kendra's visits, their greed, my plans. But the last few pages were different. They weren't about anger or revenge. They were about gratitude. Gratitude for Elena, who'd taught me that love meant giving, not taking. Gratitude for the families who'd found safety in the house we'd built. Gratitude for the lesson I'd been forced to teach, even though it had cost me my son for a while. I heard tires on the gravel road and looked up. A truck I recognized. Marcus's. He parked and got out slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. The grandkids stayed in the truck, Lily and Jacob, both bigger now than I remembered. "Dad," Marcus said, standing at the bottom of the porch steps. "Can I talk to you?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Seats open." He climbed the steps and sat down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just watched the sun disappear behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I've been thinking about what you said," Marcus started. "About respect. About earning things. About being grateful instead of greedy." I waited. Kendra and I finalized the divorce last month. She got the furniture. I got the kids and a wake-up call. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been working 2 jobs to afford a small apartment. It's not much, but it's ours. The kids have their own rooms. We're managing." "That's good," I said. "And I've been teaching them what you tried to teach me. About working for what you want. About respecting other people's boundaries. About being thankful for what you have instead of always wanting more." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. "I wrote you a lot of letters. You didn't respond to any of them, and I understand why. But I wanted to give you this one in person." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "What's it say?" "That I'm sorry. That I was wrong. That you were right to do what you did." His voice cracked. "And that I hope someday you can forgive me enough to be part of your grandkids' lives again. They ask about you, Dad. They miss you." I looked at the truck. Lily waved at me through the window. Jacob was reading a book, oblivious. "They didn't do anything wrong," I said. "Neither did you, really. You just forgot who you were for a while." Happens to the best of us. Marcus's eyes got wet. So you forgive me? I thought about Elena. About what she'd say if she were here. She'd probably smack me on the arm and tell me to stop being stubborn. Tell me that forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it, but about whether you're willing to give it. I forgave you a long time ago, son. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself. He broke down then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears that he didn't bother to hide. I reached over and gripped his shoulder. You're welcome here. You and the kids. Not to live, mind you, I like my peace. But to visit. To fish in the creek. To learn some things about carpentry if they're interested. He nodded, wiping his face. They'd like that. We sat together until the sun was fully gone and the stars started appearing. Then he stood up, shook my hand. Not a hug, we weren't there yet, but a handshake meant something, and headed back to the truck. Same time next weekend, he called out. Same time, I agreed. I watched them drive away, and then I opened the envelope. The letter inside was short. Dad, I spent 35 years thinking I knew what mattered. Then I lost everything and realized I'd been chasing the wrong things my whole life. You tried to teach me that success isn't about what you own but about who you are. I finally understand. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for building something beautiful and giving it to people who needed it more than I did. And thank you for being the kind of man I want my kids to remember. I love you, Marcus. I folded the letter and put it in my journal, right next to Elena's photo. The woods were dark now, but I could still hear the creek. Constant. Reliable. Peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The planning. The satisfaction of seeing justice done quietly. The joy of watching the haven become what it was meant to be. And I thought about Marcus's words, thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that revenge is sweet, or that justice feels good, but that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to learn what they should have known all along. I built that house to last forever, and maybe it will, just not for the people I first imagined. As I sat there listening to the night sounds, I whispered to the wind the same thing I'd whispered 100 times since Elena died. The measure of a man isn't what he gives his family, it's what he teaches them to deserve. And finally, after 2 years of anger and hurt and distance, I felt her smile back. That was my story. That was my surprise. And that was my peace. What's the most important lesson you learned from Harold's story? Share it in the comments and inspire others who might need to hear it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Your comments help us create content that matters. Thank you for being part of this family. Until next time, remember, the quietest justice is often the loudest lesson. Retry.